we fully understand what is going on in Southwest Louisiana right now. Completely comprehend it, understand it, and our prayers are with everybody that live in that sector right now, because we've been there, done that, and been through it, and we understand completely what you're about to endure. With that, we talk LSU sports, and boy, it's not been a good day for LSU sports, to say the least. And it's great to welcome longtime sports director of WBRZ in Baton Rouge, who does an outstanding job, Michael Cauble, to the show. Michael, listen, thanks. We appreciate it. I hope you're well.
Again, and what a rough day it is all the way around. You're right about that. So, like you so eloquently said moments ago, our thoughts are with everyone trying to, deal with multiple issues on this evening.
Yeah, it wouldn't be 2020. I keep hearing that every day, and it seems to really have a lot of credence.
It just gets more true and true as the days progress, no doubt about it. But like you alluded to, tough day here in Baton Rouge as it concerns the LSU Tigers, both for the football team. And, I don't know that it's necessarily any more tough for Will Wade in that scenario. I think, maybe just a little bit of new information, or at least, further information from the NCAA as far as their investigation goes on that front. But we can jump in wherever you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, we'll start there. Obviously, everybody's been waiting for such a long, extended period of time for the other shoe to drop. It finally did today, at least with notification. And look, it's not anything that we didn't know already. The documentary put a voice to it, which didn't help matters, but it wasn't anything new. Now we're getting some concrete information about what they've disclosed to LSU. So this much we know. The other part of this that we know is the fact that Scott Woodward didn't hire Will Wade. And Will Wade also agreed via the second time around to be fired with cause. And if there is cause, you can rest assured that that could happen. So I would assume that's on the table now based upon what's transpiring. Don't want to be premature about anything, but what's your read on this situation? Do you think Will Wade will still be LSU's basketball coach into this upcoming season?
Oh, wow. Yes, I do. Well, just to answer your question, initially I do, and that's based on the presumption that there will be no resolution to this, before we get to the basketball season. Now, if you ask me, will he be the head coach this time next year or in 2 years, then it gets probably a little bit more cloudy. But I think that LSU has, and everyone is doing their due diligence, and that's why we see this long delay from the idea that there is an investigation to any kind of summation of it. And I think that's where LSU is right now. I called around a little today just to kind of read the room and see, is this a deal where they've had enough of this and they're ready to cut ties, or is this they're going to kind of see it through and then make their decisions based upon what the results might be. And I think it's more of the latter than the former. I think that this is very much still an investigation, and really the investigation is in somewhat of its infancy. And what it is now is that we're getting a little bit more, I guess, public knowledge of, is that the investigation portion is being handed over to what we'll call an independent arbitrator, for lack of a better word, so that they can hope to move towards some resolution, because both parties agree that, wherever they're at right now isn't going to get them to the end results. And I think LSU agreed to that, to have some kind of summation to it. Will Wade, said, through his legal counsel, said they welcome it, and certainly the NCAA feels like, they need to have a little bit of outside help in this if they're going to reach any kind of conclusion. So, we haven't seen a notice of allegations. That comes at the end of the findings. But, through these different Freedom of Information Act requests, I've been able to obtain the legal documents back and forth from the NCAA and from Will Wade's lawyers to the NCAA. And they paint two different pictures, one of Will Wade dragging his feet and being uncooperative from the NCAA, and Wade's defense team saying, look, we've given you everything you've asked for when you've asked for it. You're not being honest in the way that you've asked for it, at least publicly. So, I think there is an orchestration of, procedure, I guess might be the best way to describe it, that is going through the machinations of what it takes to get this thing done. And I think that's a little bit of why we've seen this really just long, drawn-out process that still could be months away from resolution.
What's truly remarkable is that in the midst of this smoke, and some would say fire, Wade has continued to recruit at an incredibly high level. LSU has signed a lot of really good players, and they got all their returning players coming back who pulled out of the draft. The bottom line is that on the floor, if everybody shows up and they have their season without any infractions, this should be a really good basketball team in 2020-21.
It's incredible. And what's, to your point, even more surprising is that, it just seems like from the outside, it really does seem like Will Wade's just kind of thumbing his nose at every, new nugget of information that comes along, and they're just plowing full course ahead, with whatever he's doing. And I know that's not necessarily the case, but it certainly feels like a game of cops and robbers, if you will. And, Will's just eluding them as they try to chase him. But, that would imply some guilt, and I don't want to do that. It's just, it really is interesting, like you alluded to, that they're so successful. And now, Ken, there's this dichotomy of, okay, well, whereas in the past you may have just jettisoned a coach with any of these implications, when you have some success and you elevate a program to the heights that, he has done in a short amount of time with some significant roadblocks along the way, it makes you wonder, okay, is this something where you stand by your man and maybe we'll deal with the ramifications because you do feel like he is a winner, you do feel like there is a potential, or is there a moral obligation to, if any wrongdoing is found, that you need to cut ties and move on. So it's very interesting. It's interesting in its procedure, but I think it will be just as interesting in its outcome once we get to the finish line.
Well, we look around, and Sean Miller's still got a job, and Bill Self still got a job, and again here in LSU, Will Wade still has a job. So, listen, I don't know what to make of it. I have been fair-minded throughout the process. It's clear that there was some wrongdoing. To what degree is the debate? It's clear that Wade handled it wrong initially with his own employer. He corrected course with that. Then a new athletic director comes in, so I'm just not sure where this leaves it. I know Scott Woodward's a pretty sharp guy, though.
Yeah, and the other thing is I think every person has their own interpretation of what's wrong. Because to me, I felt when this initially happened, I felt like LSU really mishandled this. I mean, how do you have a coach that you can't have a conversation with without involving lawyers? That seemed like a real breakdown between Joe Oliva and whoever was giving him counsel and the coach, Will Wade, and his staff. Why does it become public? Why do you get to a point where there's this detente, of no, I'm not coming to talk to you or what have you, and how does that ever get public is beyond me. And then you also have this, like I said, moral ambiguity of, well, is he really hurting anybody if he's enriching people's lives, in these allegations? So it is cheating, and those are rules that you agree to play by. So there's certainly this level to athleticism that, you could chew on all day and probably not be wrong or right in your, assumptions either way.
Visiting with Michael Cauble at WBRZ in Baton Rouge, and turning our attention to football. Of course, back in June, LSU placed at least 30 players in quarantine after the coronavirus pandemic struck to some degree, and now the Advocate reporting today that all but 4 LSU offensive linemen have been quarantined due to exposure to the virus. So before we get into the potential allegations about LSU football today, first the quarantine issue. It's a day of issues for LSU, and obviously they're dealing with these things pretty well. The good news is they don't play football for a month, so there's time to get these guys back. The bad news is this just a first salvo of a break, an outbreak, I should say, or is this just a limited situation? I guess none of us know.
Yeah, you don't know, and certainly there's a tinge to gratitude that it's happening now and not a month later, like you alluded to, because could you imagine this happening in the middle of the season once it begins? And, Shelly Molineck's the point person for LSU who's really handled a lot of their COVID response and has from the beginning. told me very early on, the team that's going to be victorious this year, that's going to be a championship team, is going to be the team that handles the virus the best, both on the preventative side, but on the recovery side as well. And, you see that play out this week when you have the potential 14 offensive linemen. LSU lists 18 on their roster, and if the Advocate report is correct, only 4 are there. And it's 14 offensive linemen just decimating that position and really making practice impossible for any real practice kind of work. So it's incredible to hear. Certainly, to some degree, it's relatable. Again, we don't know if those are actual cases or just exposure to one case. It could be one guy that exposed 13 guys. It could be 10 guys and exposed 3. So we don't know the particulars, but it's certainly alarming. And how they respond, how they recover, how they get these kids back, the protocols. They do have measures in place, to isolate and recover and then test and assess, for a healthy return to action. So this is just one more step of I guess, testing those protocols. And I will say this, it seems like LSU has been at the forefront of this from the beginning. And one of the things that Dr. Katie O'Neill, the infectious disease expert that LSU is working with here locally in Baton Rouge, and even Shelley had said, is that the familiarity with the disease, because of the high number of the virus, I should say, because of the high number of cases down in New Orleans initially, has really given them a working knowledge. And that's one thing that's impressed me about LSU, is that I don't necessarily feel like they fear the virus, but certainly they respect it and they'd like to distance themselves as much as they can. But they also understand that this is an obstacle that every team probably will face this year, and it is an obstacle that you can work a solution through. And I think that's what they've been able to do for the most part. And this is, I guess, just the next step of that obstacle.
And then with regard to the football allegations, of course, we all know about Odell Beckham and the stupidity that took place there on the sideline at the championship game. And LSU took action to get the money back, so there's that. But then you've got the more serious allegation about a booster paying a student-athlete's father for a job that was not performed by the student-athlete over 5 years. And so there's that distraction along with the Darius Geis distraction, which Ed Orgeron has flatly denied, a former student-athlete saying he knew all about things. So what about the football situation? Is this something that you would consider minor, medium, major, or how would you look at these potential problems?
I would say that they're relatively minor, but of course when you lump 4 of them together with a major basketball investigation, then it's going to garner a lot of attention. And I think that's LSU's stance right now. It's why are you putting the football in with the basketball? These things are separate.
And I agree with that. Yeah, by the way, I agree with
that. Yeah. I mean, to some degree, they've already been handled on the football side, like you alluded to. The Beckham thing, to me, is the easiest one to, overcome. I mean, whether he was drunk or just being foolish, I don't know the particulars of, but that's obviously something that LSU identified as a problem right away, corrected right away, and I'm sure is putting in precautions to prevent, or already has. The John Paul Funes thing, to me, always sounded more like a money laundering scheme, separate from the football operation, more so than an actual violation of NCAA rules. Now, that still has yet to be determined. But from everything that I've gathered, it felt more like that was a separate vehicle outside, and the university was kind of pulled in, as a part-time player. I guess I'll just kind of say it that way. And then the latest was it seemed like a minor recruiting violation from Coach Orgeron that also could be addressed and probably happens, within every football program across the country, and is usually addressed. But so on their own, they feel like, very different and sometimes minor situations. But then when you lump them in together, you can certainly see where the NCAA, if they want to, is trying to develop some kind of institutional control case. And that could be problematic. And but I think LSU is very strongly fighting to, keep those things separate, which you and I both agree they should be separate. They're separate entities that happened over on people's different watches, various coaches, various athletic directors. Just because they're now being known or being grouped together, I don't think those are necessarily related. But it's
Right,
a bad look. You're right. It's a
No,
bad
it is.
PR.
Sure. And then with regard to the guy situation, Ogeron just basically said that, he said he flat out denied it. And then, of course, after he denied it, he was asked a question in his Zoom opportunity yesterday, and he said, look, I made the statement, that's it. So he's not going to comment any further. Again, this is a he said, she said, unless there's some sort of evidence.
Yeah, and I got a little clarification from people inside the program regarding that, and the way that it was portrayed to me, it sounded much more palatable than the article made it sound initially, the statement. So there might be some degrees of, like this is maybe what I said and you interpreted it differently, or I didn't necessarily say that, but you took it this way. So there's certainly some degree of that. And look, Ken, I mean, you've been around enough that, he speaks his mind. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily come off as fluid as you might expect with Kane, but I think you can understand the intent that he has. And that's probably, a South Louisiana just trait, right? I mean, we're going to be honest. Sometimes we're going to be brutally honest. We're going to hug you real tight, and then we're going to, get on you real hard. And so some of that, might come across differently to different people and be interpreted different ways. So, again, that one seems like a real periphery, satellite orbiting the program that when taken in as the whole with the others, is just another kind of a level of a black eye, but nothing that I don't think they can overcome.
And then, of course, a couple of minutes left with Michael Cauble at WBRZ in Baton Rouge. Ed Ogeron, same Zoom opportunity yesterday, really talked about newcomers, the two transfers, of course, which everyone has talked about to a degree, one from North Dakota State, the other from Harvard, and both are going to start, and both have looked good, and the linebacker has been exceptional. And then, of course, he talked about quite a few freshmen, Arik Gilbert most notably, with his comments about him, and no surprise, guy was the highest-ranked player in the country, but talked about some other freshmen, too, that he was impressed with, and said nice things about T.J. Finley and Max Johnson. Went out of his way to really say nice things about Coy Moore, another freshman, and, of course, talked about some defensive players as well. So quite a few freshmen that he singled out yesterday. So does that indicate we're going to see a lot of true freshmen play this year?
I think you're going to have to for a number of reasons. Clearly, the number of players they lost in the draft opens the door for new players. And there's a couple of things, and I was thinking about this today, and it really, because you hear the names, and even for me who's here and hears them routinely, it's trying to put a name to a position and then where are they on the depth chart. And you hear all these names and you hear speak about all these players, these new players, even if they're not freshmen, they're new players expected to make an impact. And you just think back, and what triggered to me, Ken, was that we didn't really have a spring to digest these players at their positions, to understand the depth of the depth chart and who really looks good in a position and who might look better, shuffled over to this spot on the field. And so I think right now, with the limited amount of access that we have due to the virus, with the limited amount of information coming out of practices, it really does feel jarring to hear, these new players in new positions, freshmen even, being such an impact player. Because you hear about them, all along the defensive line, as you alluded to, in the secondary, receiver position. It just seems, and maybe some of that has to do with LSU being such a proven commodity and knowing all those household names from last season that are no longer on this team. And it really just does feel like, man, this is a reinvented team to some degree. And while we expect them to be good, I don't think we can gloss over the fact that there are just so many question marks related to the performance still left to be seen on this club.
No doubt. And look, Ed Ogeron has always struck me as an honest guy, so I don't think some coaches put names out there intentionally. Sometimes it's camouflage, sometimes it's real, but I think Ogeron's an honest guy, so I think he genuinely feels strongly about the guys that he mentioned, and I agree with you because of the fact that they lost so many players. There will be some opportunity, but make no mistake about it, this is still going to be a very good team.
I agree. I hope we get to see him on the field. You hate to think about what might potentially derail this season, and just seeing Jamar out on the field, for another year. You hope, you get to see that as a college football fan.
And I'd be remiss before I let you get away, too, with regard to high school in the LHSA. The coaches are getting louder and louder every day.
Aren't they, though? Man.
Public, private, it doesn't matter what sector. Hey, I wish they were this together when it comes to the whole stupid split, okay? Because here I am seeing all these public school coaches who are adamantly demanding to play, and I see private school coaches, and Gabe Fertitta's a good friend, lobbying very hard to get other people behind it as well. I've got Frank Gendusa of St. Martin's Episcopal on right after this. I'm sure he's going to say the same thing. And look, I'll talk to Eddie Bonan once a week. I'll talk to him again. But at some point, is he going to have to split with the governor and quit following that edict, or is he going to stay the course? Because if he stays the course, it's pretty obvious they're staying in phase 2, at least until September. There's one more window to get to 3 and possibly to start this thing on time, second week of October. How do you feel this is going to turn out?
I don't see them deviating from the state one bit, because it's a safety blanket, right? I mean, let's call it what it is. You don't have to be the one to make the calls to put your, these thousands of student athletes in jeopardy. You can play along. It's a safe play, and I understand the coach's perspective. I understand Gabe calling for leadership, but look, the LHSAA is not constitutionally developed to be the leader. It has always, and this was our problem with the public-private split. It has always, as far as I can remember, has always said that it's the executioner, for lack of a better word, of the principals and help me out here. Basically, it works for the principals in the school district.
Yeah, well, that's correct. The principals run the organization. That's correct.
Right, and which I think is complete baloney, because to me is like, what's the point then? You're just a facilitator of football games, and you make sure referees show up, and you enforce some rules. So it's, I mean, this isn't necessarily a new argument, and this isn't even a new level of the argument, layer to the argument. So I'm not expecting, these earth-shattering decisions to be coming from the LHSAA. I think they'll continue lockstep with the state. And again, honestly, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad idea. I mean, I do think, just like I think LSU needs to start coming out and preparing people for what will be the worst case scenario, of look, we may have high school football games, but your parents won't be there. There may be college football games, the fans won't be in the stands. Like, we need to start, I think, preparing people for the bad news. Therefore, if we have the good news, then it'll be a boost instead of the opposite direction.
Right there with you, and I agree with every point you made. You can follow him on Twitter at Cauble, Cauble. He does a great job at WBRZ. Michael Cauble, thanks so much for the visit tonight, and hopefully next time there'll be some positive news to talk about.
Right? Yeah, we'll bring you back on a good day. Thanks for having me, Ken.
Yeah, a pleasure, Mike. Thank you. All right.